Dragon's Dogma 2 class system, also known as Vocations, lets you choose between 10 different archetypes that define how your character plays as you fight and explore the game's massive world. From the starting vocations, such as Fighter and Mage, to the more complex roles like the Mystic Spearhand, there's lots to take into account when selecting a vocation for your character or for your pawns. With both new and returning options from the original Dragon's Dogma, this guide will attempt to make your choice that much easier and answer the question, which is the right vocation for you. Now, at the start of the game, Dragon's Dogma 2 lets you choose between 4 basic vocations, with the remaining 6 being unlocked through more special means later on. This includes Fighter, Mage, Thief, and Archer. Each one of these fits a distinctive role from the traditional RPG playstyles and will have different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to combat. Let's get started with the Fighter. The Fighter is a well-rounded option that can play both offensively and defensively for those who enjoy a hands-on melee approach. The Fighter vocation excels in close-range melee combat, wielding a one-handed sword in one hand and the shield in the other. Fighters can slice through enemy ranks and deliver powerful blows while also using their shields to protect themselves and their allies in combat. Even though they can fit a more frontline tank role, that doesn't mean that the fighter can't deal some serious damage. In the previous Dragon's Dogma game, fighters using one-handed swords could deliver devastating blows using abilities such as the Sword Aerial Heavy Attack or the Dire Onslaught Light combo chain. Wielding shields natively also means that they get access to various blunt attacks that can break through enemy defenses and even reflect blows back to their faces when performing perfect parries. So learning enemy attack patterns and anticipating hits can make all the difference when following up with a perfect shield block at the right moment. From the gameplay we had so far, it seems fighters will get many returning skills from the previous game, but it's also possible it will include some new mechanics, just like how many other vocations will as well. However, the biggest downside to the fighter is its rather limited attack range, with flying enemies notoriously being the fighter's biggest weakness in the previous game. Even though previously it used to have charge-like attacks acting as gap closers, it still needed to be in the enemy's face to truly be effective. It's also not the most flashy archetype either, so for those who want something with a bit more flair, there are other options to choose from later on. This brings us to the Mage. Being a long-range class wielding a staff, the Mage can channel the power of magic to cast both offensive, defensive, and even support spells for its party. Mages offer a multitude of ways in their approach to combat. The more advanced and powerful the magic is, the longer the incantation time will be. And as a mage, you will experience the strategic excitement of deftly executing your magic abilities. What's great about mages is their ability to cast different elemental spells on the fly, such as ice spikes, fireballs, and even calling down the power of lightning, making them a very adaptable class. Perhaps its biggest use comes from its ability to enchant their party members' weapons with different elemental boons, providing additional damage effects for the fight ahead. Early on, this source of extra damage can be of tremendous help when exploiting enemy weaknesses, but in the previous game, these enchantments could also change the way certain mage skills worked, such as the focus shot gaining different effects depending on the elemental boon active. Now, mages used to also be the only healing vocation, making them incredibly valuable to have in any party setup, an ability it seems that they continue to retain in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, on the downside, mages can suffer from weak defenses against melee enemies, which is why positioning is the key to your survival, and you'll generally want to stay back from the front lines anyway. Also, having such a high skill flexibility early on can make it a potentially more complex vocation to master. Luckily, pawns can also be designated mages, so if you don't want to bother with all of this, you can just designate this to a pawn and choose a different class for your character. This brings us to the Thief. The Thief is your typical nimble, close-range melee assassin. It's capable of attacking with deadly speed, dealing rapid and consecutive strikes with daggers in both hands, while exhibiting outstanding mobility. While the per-hit damage might be lower compared to other vocations, the Thief more than makes up for it with its much higher attack speed. Thieves quickly step away after striking, exploiting openings to cling onto enemies, and inflicting heavy damage. This ability to swiftly moving in and out of enemies' range makes them a difficult target to pin down if played properly. A core mechanic of this vocation is its ability to grab onto foes, clinging on them and then giving them the upper hand against single target boss encounters. In fact, in the previous game, Strider equivalent excelled in single target scenario, though it did suffer from a lack of proper AoE. So in Dragon's Dogma 2, the Thief also seems to exhibit some of these very interesting abilities, plus a bunch of new ones. This includes a very strong counterattack that can be pulled off when reacting at the right moment against an incoming attack. They can also imbue their own daggers with the fire elemental, making them less reliant on mages compared to some of the other vocations. And they also follow a similar theme to the Strider from before, thieves of course being able to attach explosive fireworks to their targets and even detonating them on demand, leaving their targets stunned and disoriented. As far as weaknesses go, this vocation doesn't have the defensive capabilities of other classes such as Fighter, so you'll have to be more careful how you position yourself in combat. It's also likely that, just like the Strider from before, the Thief will lack proper AoE attacks, making them less efficient against one versus all encounters. This brings us to the fourth and final base vocation, the Archer. For all of those who prefer long-distance combat but want to be a lot more nimble than a mage, we have the Archer, another ranged vocation specializing in long-range physical attacks using primarily a bow and arrows. They perform their attacks from afar and can even target enemies in high positions. In addition to this, they are also essential in supporting the front lines. For example, by targeting enemy weaknesses, they can create opportunities for your allies to strike. In some of the gameplay footage, we've seen them using a very powerful long-winded charge shot that has the power to completely bring down even the largest enemies to its knees, creating the perfect opening for your allies to move in. As they level, archers also gain access to skills which allow you to shoot arrows more quickly or even to fire multiple arrows at once. This can be especially helpful when delivering elemental damage to exploit enemies' weaknesses or using explosive arrows to take down entire groups. Besides this, being an offshoot of the Strider just like the Thief, they also get skills to improve mobility, allowing you to disengage and put some extra distance between you and your attacker. It's also very likely that this extra mobility, just like in the case of the Thief, could come into play in unique ways now that Dragon's Dogma 2 features extended environmental interactions. So cool trick shots and other shenanigans may be perfectly suited for the Archer. As far as weaknesses go, it's mostly defense related, as this is still a slightly more squishy vocation that needs to be careful about positioning. Also, its weapon usage might be slightly limited given its choice of bows, which is why the Archer might not be the best choice if you want to exclusively focus on melee range. But let's move over to advanced classes, and there's one thing we have to specify about them, and that is the fact that in Dragon's Dogma 2, the way you unlock at least some of the advanced classes is not done by leveling up the base vocations. Instead, it's done via quests that deepen your relationships with various vocation masters. You will find this in different towns and cities, and this will of course start with you finding the weapons of advanced vocations and then bringing them back to the vocation masters. They can also grant special tomes that teach skills of the highest order, so-called Master's Teachings, which are supposed to be some of the strongest in the entire game. So let's talk about some of these advanced vocations, starting with the first one. Mystic Spearhand is a brand new hybrid vocation added in Dragon's Dogma 2, one fully available only to the Arisen, meaning that you can't have pawns using it. It somewhat resembles the previous game's Mystic Knight, however it includes lots of unique mechanics. Being a hybrid, it specializes in both melee and magical attacks, making it one of the few vocations effective at any range. It can use melee attacks, can quickly dash to any target, even use ranged magical spells, and has plenty of CC via paralyzed mechanics. As its name implies, the Mystic Spearhand uses its main weapon called the Duo Spear to adeptly overwhelm its enemies with flurry of attacks, effectively being able to hit multiple targets at the same time. One of its most interesting skills, however, is its ability to stun a group of targets with a magical debuff and then following with a spear combo that quickly teleports between and hits each affected target, all while an after image continues to provide additional hits and damage. As you level up the vocation, it also gains various spells capable to paralyze enemies. Its incredible access to crowd control mechanics also extends to single target bosses, as the Mystic Spearhand can swiftly jump towards enemies even once flying further away, something that normally other melee classes have difficulty with. But we've seen it wielding the power to manipulate the corpses of their fallen enemies and effectively turning them into useful projectiles in combat. For a melee vocation, Mystic Spearhand is definitely a flashy one and no doubt something to try out if you prefer this style of very artistic and visually appealing combat. Not many downsides to think of here, except maybe some dual spear attacks seemingly locking you in animations, so careful planning of your strongest attacks and positioning during the enemy stun phase might be important. Also, having the capacity to switch between targets so easily while also providing ample CC means you'll have to do the heavy lifting in fights to ensure that other party members have ample time to follow up with their own abilities. We also have a ranged counterpart to this, well, somewhat. It's called the Magick Archer. Available only to the Arisen, the Magick Archer vocation excels in long-range combat with their magical arrows. In addition to attacking or healing, Magick Archers are also adept at supporting their allies in combat. They can learn a custom skill that unleashes a devastating attack over a wide area in exchange for reducing their own maximum HP. In the previous game, they used to be an insanely strong option with incredible versatility, having access to bows, daggers, and even staves. This meant they were extremely adaptable, providing incredible damage, party support, but also lots of crowd control mechanics. In Dragon's Dogma 2, Magick Archers seem to continue this role of being very specialized into dealing damage with pure magic arrows. In fact, its biggest draw comes from its ability to use these magic arrows as far more superior options compared to the regular physical ones. They also home in on targets, effectively letting arrows to continuously hit the same target in its weak spots over and over, or hit multiple smaller targets in a larger area. Having the option to choose between different elemental arrows really enables this vocation to target specific enemy weaknesses and taking them down much quicker. We've also seen Magick Archers using an arrow shot capable of resurrecting targets from afar, a long-range spell that no doubt can be extremely useful. Previously, this vocation could also buff party members, similarly using their magical arrows, so fully expecting that to carry over to Dragon's Dogma 2. It's hard to pin down any weaknesses for the Magick Archer given how strong it already is, but it's good to know that this can be a bit more high risk, high reward than other classes given how some of its strongest attacks can reduce HP. Additionally, positioning is another key factor here, as well as knowing how to make use of different elements to exploit enemy weaknesses while providing crowd control to create openings. Situational awareness also becomes important as you have the power to resurrect and even buff fallen party members in combat, so something to keep an eye out for. This brings us to the 7th vocation, which is the Sorcerer. Now, the Sorcerer is a vocation completely specializing in various devastating, high burst but also long cast magic attacks. Their spells are conjured with both hands through a large staff and can change the tide of battle at any given opportunity. As their magic spells take longer to cast, it is key for the Sorcerer to find a safe place and determine the correct moment to strike. For those confused about the difference between this and the Mage, well, let's just say that the Sorcerer is going to bring any magic ability you have to the next level. You'll get to call down massive meteors from the sky, cause hurricanes, unleash the power of thunder and lightning, and much more. Sorcerers are excellent at unleashing powerful AoE spells that deal insane bursts of damage. However, it all comes at the cost of having much longer cast durations. However, an interesting mechanic that sorcerers possess is the ability to use Quick Spell, which will shorten the spell cast time at the expense of stamina. Luckily, this can be combined with one of the new abilities called Galvanize, which will instead recover back some of the lost stamina. Effectively, playing between these two means that you can continuously use Quick Cast without having to consume any stamina regen items. In the previous game, sorcerers were already capable of using many of the mage's core skills and even the elemental boons, so for mages, enthusiasts that want to go to the next step, this is going to feel like a natural upgrade. All other access to healing abilities, even applying buffs to your team members' weapons via elemental boons, should all still be there for party-wide support. Though in the previous Dragon's Dogma, sorcerers also had access to skills such as Lassitude that could slow down and even completely stop enemy movement, including attacks in a larger area, plus various other unique mechanics such as Necromancy to call forth on fallen enemies and aid you in combat. Now on the downside, obviously this is another vocation with lower defenses, so they will be rather vulnerable to attacks. That's why positioning yourself is again going to be important. You're going to want to stay in the back, out of harm's way, while your team stays closer to the front lines. This is going to be the key to your survival. Another factor is the much longer cast duration, meaning that in short fights against regular mobs, the Sorcerer can fall off in damage as you don't get to cast as often. At number 8, we have another new vocation. The Trickster is another vocation exclusive to the Arisen and again completely new to Dragon's Dogma 2. They have the power to conjure illusions through the smoke created by their own unique weapon called the Ceremonial Censer. But they can also use illusions to deceive enemies into fighting against their own and even have the ability to temporarily increase the power of pawns way beyond their limit. So it's clear the Trickster has a very unique playstyle, not just by Dragon's Dogma 2 standards, but its entire RPG genre standard. First, because Tricksters don't actually deal much damage with their weapon, instead this helps them to draw in aggro. Combining this with their power to create smoke clones and even illusionary surfaces, it means they can really exploit surrounding environments to bring enemies to their doom. It might seem unconventional, but sometimes the most effective tool to bring down an enemy is to literally make it jump off a cliff. Besides placing down fake walls, this vocation is also excellent at scouting ahead and sneaking around enemy camps via its astral projection. As long as your physical body doesn't get hit, this can be combined with some of your other skills to cleanly set your enemies up with some illusions before ever setting foot near them. Given the Trickster's support nature, they are also best at buffing their party with some of their incense abilities, causing everyone to deal a lot more damage than they normally do. Plus, more advanced options can eventually be learned, like for example calling forth illusionary dragons to truly terrify your enemies to their core, leaving them open for some big damage. Now, its biggest downside is obviously its unconventional playstyle, relying on more indirect ways of taking down enemies, so those who seek a more direct approach might want to look somewhere else. Also, environmental hazards and cliffs might not always be available, so some of its skills might suffer from limited use at times. That being said, it's no doubt going to be one of those vocations that can really make up for some interesting funny moments to be remembered. At number 9, we have the Warrior. Unlike the Fighter, the Warrior no longer uses a shield. Instead, it wields two-handed weapons such as great swords and hammers and relies on their heavy armor and robust constitution to carry them in combat. They aren't tanks since they lack shields, instead they offer far higher bursts of damage, especially via charge attacks. This lets you wind up extremely high damage melee attacks, which can shave off huge amounts of the enemy's health bar while also stunning them in the process. Later on, warriors can also learn an ability that can help with slow weapon swings that will require you to well time your button presses, but this will in turn let you perform much faster attack animations and as such providing a much quicker series of blows for some insane damage. It's not all slow attacks though, as warriors also gain access to Barge, an ability which can be used with R1 to quickly shoulder bash into a target, stunning them and leaving them open in the process. Overall, warriors is an excellent option for those who prefer more deliberate and strong melee attacks, while also having a lot more potential for AoE compared to the basic fighters. At the end of the day, your oversized weapons can easily hit multiple targets at the same time, and there are even many skills that can further help with that, including continuous spin attacks that will send enemies flying. Now, it's hard to think of downsides for a class that both excels in high damage and great survivability. However, if we were to think of one, it's probably the fact that its attacks can feel rather slow at first. And the only way to make them quicker is via precise button presses that come via later unlocks. Also, being a frontline vocation means that you're constantly in harm's way, so being methodical with the way you unleash your strongest attacks and reserve them for the moment the enemy is down will be important to your survival. Last but definitely not least, at number 10 we have one more vocation, the Warfarer. The Warfarer is a new vocation exclusive to Dragon's Dogma 2 and exclusive to the Arisen that can use every weapon and learn different skills from each vocation. By using diverse weapons, the Warfarer can respond to any situation and create combos that cross vocational boundaries. The Warfarer's lower base stats require them to utilize the situational strengths of different weapon types to be on par with other vocations with specialized strengths, and definitely looks to be an incredibly fun and versatile option to have. It's going to pretty much give you access to everything that you want, and even its icon shows that it can use bow and arrow, even like swords and even staves. So if you're undecided which one to use, I guess the best approach is to use everything. Now from the sounds of it, it's also going to have some downsides compared to going purely spec'd into one single vocation. It seems that your stats are going to be lower than some of the others. Plus, it also seems that it's going to respond differently, may even not have the same highest level of the same skills as if you were to focus on one single class. Unfortunately, it seems we don't have any official footage on the Warfarer, or at least it's very limited at the time, which, yeah, more surprises for when the game comes out. It definitely sounds like something we can eventually achieve much later on in the game. Or who knows, maybe it comes sooner than the rest, but via different means. But that is pretty much it with all of the 10 vocations in Dragon's Dogma 2. Let me know down below in the comments which are going to be the first ones you will main. Personally, I think I'm going to go with either Thief or with the Archer, and then maybe switch eventually to either the Magick Archer or the Mystic Spearhand. Those two personally I found to be the coolest, but I definitely have a bias towards the Mystic Spearhand. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.